Hi everyone, welcome to the first session of ADEX Pixel Expo 8 monthly webinar global webcast, the December series. So happening on every 8th of the month as we convene over a united cause, that is our love for diving and the ocean. For today's session, we have Ocean Conversation, the 10 levels of fugitive plastic escape with Louise Hart. Louise started Plastic Collective in 2016 to develop and create the Shredder, a waste plastic shredding machine and an educational training package for remote communities. Louise is passionate about reducing plastic waste and believes education is a key component to global change. Now we will let Louise share her passion for sustainability with us. The floor is yours, Louise. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, ADEX, for having me. I'm really pleased to be back here and looking forward to coming back to the ADEX conferences when they're back on as well. So today, I'll just share my screen. Today, I'm talking about the hierarchy of capture. Whoops. Sorry, I've got the wrong one there. Start again. Oops, sorry. Deep practices. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just getting my fault. Oops. Technology is wonderful, isn't it? Okay, 1 second. All right. Okay, try that one more time. Here we go. Okay. Right, now you can see my screen okay?
Yep, I see that.
Fantastic. Okay, so yes, welcome to my hierarchy of capture, the 10 points of fugitive plastic escape. So in this talk, I'd like to talk about the mismanagement of plastics, introduce curbside and fugitive plastics, talk about the 10 capture points, and then look at the prevention, monitoring, and remediation of these. So how do we prevent plastics from escaping the environment or being mismanaged? So looking at, first we need to understand where plastics are going and what's happening. So in all communities, the mismanagement of plastic causes serious air, water, and soil pollution, harming people, animals, and planet. To prevent the pollution, we need to understand where it's escaping from into the environment. This graph here compares the mismanagement of plastics for each country compared to their GDP. As you can see, there's no real clear correlation between poverty and mismanaged waste. We have both wealthier countries and poorer countries with low amounts of mismanaged waste and high amounts of mismanaged waste. So to prevent pollution, to recover the value from plastics, I'm sorry, I've just skipped a slide. So yeah, in an ideal world, after we use the plastic, it's either stored, collected, and transferred to recovery recycling programs. So looking at what happens to the world's plastic, basically 20% is recycled or less than 20%, 25% is burnt, and 55% of all the plastics then have ended up in the environment, in landfills, ocean. So we're looking at we can break discarded plastics into two simple groups, either curbside or fugitive. Curbside means plastic materials that are collected from residential businesses and organisations after the use, usually by local service providers, waste managers, resource recovery services. And they can be divided into three groups. We have single-use plastics, hard single-use plastics, bottle caps, containers, and other food and drink packaging, soft single-use wrappings, as well as non-single-use plastic. So these are the three categories we use in our sorting programs. For fugitive or escapee plastics, these are basically curbside plastics that have escaped into the system. So either through poor practices, environmental conditions, or simply a lack of infrastructure. The leakage of the environment through mismanagement is the biggest problem that we have, and this is what I'm trying to address with my 10 points of capture. So again, similar structure of what I call the HSUP or hard single-use plastics, soft single-use plastics, non-single-use plastics such as toothbrushes, shoes, buckets, and we've also got ghost gear for the Fugitive. So the hierarchy of capture, to track the pathways of curbside and fugitive plastics, I created a hierarchy of capture with 10 levels or 10 points at which the discarded plastic can be captured before it'll be lost forever in the deep ocean trenches where no humans can reach it. The purpose of this hierarchy is to empower people with the knowledge on how to develop their own local action plans and toolkits to prevent plastics escaping into the environment and into the oceans. The hierarchy starts with the easiest capture point, collection bins, with curbside materials that have not escaped into the environment and are the easiest to recover and recycle. But once the plastics escapes through mismanagement, it passes through the different levels from roadside litter or township litter to gutters, down into drains and traps, through riparian vegetation, boat ramps and camp areas, then into the water, which goes through the intertidal, foreshore, shallow water, coastal water, and open ocean. The final and the most remote level is the deep ocean, where most likely by this stage, the materials are seriously degraded by UV light and water and will be most likely broken into small fragments. A lot of this material will then sink below the surface and will be sitting in the water column and then enter the ocean guys. So capturing the material at this level is extremely hard and often way beyond the reach of humans. We use the word escape in preference to the word leakage, as escape's more active and it can be controlled, whereas leakage makes you feel a bit powerless to do anything about it. We want to address specific human behaviours, natural systems and infrastructure grants. So we'll start at the top. So starting with the first one, collection bins with your curbside material. So most households and businesses have varying levels of waste material collection bins. Some areas, in particular remote and poorer communities, have to deal with their waste by either burning, burying or dumping it. Other places may have waste collection services where either a council truck will come and pick up the materials. And if communities are really lucky, they might have a materials recovery facility where many of the waste items can be recycled. The mismanagement of bins would be poorly designed and poorly managed bins, lack of services and infrastructure. So without a dedicated collection bin or curbside service, people have to deal with it themselves. And often you'll see overflowing bins where the wind and animals will often spread materials into the environment. The impact is that people will also dump waste in bins when they're not available or they are full, particularly along in areas where there's a lot of people. So the prevention for this is to ensure there's practical, well-designed bins that separate materials into organics, recyclables and waste, ensure regular services are maintained and monitor the bins. Also reporting if any bins are overflowing and they need to be addressed. Different bins will be managed by different groups. Some will be managed by the businesses they are in front of. So when you're reporting, notifying people, you just need to find out who's managing those bins. The second one is township and roadside litter. So the mismanagement of people tossing waste from vehicles, littering on the sides of the roads, vehicles that have got poorly secured loads, that material blows off while they're driving, can all end up on the side of the road. When they go to do the roadside cutting of the grass without removing the litter, this causes a lot of problems as well, as the shredded material will then be made smaller to flow into the gutters and drains back into the waterways. When the rains come in many areas, the plastics along the side of the road will naturally wash down into the ravines, creeks and waterways after the rain. And this causes serious problems, particularly in places where you've got high levels of rain. So the prevention of this is ensuring councils, government agencies who are responsible for the roadside maintenance are looking after the areas and keeping them clean. In some areas, you may need to establish some bin systems, particularly roadside areas. But when they're doing cleanups, community areas can adopt a road, they can clean up areas we often walk along our roads along here and we clean up any materials on the side of the road. Also, just reporting the pollution and dumping is really important to ensure that your local area is kept clean. The next stage will be the gutters, drains and traps. So gutters come in all shapes and sizes depending on their location, the amount of rainfall and the available building materials. So typically in areas of high rainfall, there's very deep gutters, and specifically for diverting a lot of rain from townships and from the homes to avoid flooding. During the dry season, plastic can accumulate and wait until the first big downpour, and then will go into the drains. The poorly designed gutters and badly managed traps can also have a serious impact on communities, including blocking drains that lead to flooding. Plastics are often flushed directly into these stormwater drains after heavy rains, and where no traps exist, will go straight out into the waterways. So the impact of this, the litter in the gutters and drains, as I said, causes serious problems with flooding, can also be ingested by animals when it goes back into the water. And entanglements in machinery are really common, like mowers and slashing machines and cutting the materials. So prevention of this is understanding your water flow system, your stormwater drains. It's vital to reduce pollution and marine water. Mapping these main drain points is also very useful, because that will identify areas of high accumulation, and you can start to remediate different areas, like putting surf socks, such as this one that was put on one of the drainage pipes in Perth. So to collect all the material, but it allows the water to flow through. Other places set up drain traps, and they'll come up and they'll vacuum out the drain trap to ensure that they're kept clean, to stop the sediment from flowing through the waterways. So the next level is the riparian vegetation barriers. Trees, grasses, reeds and other plants that live between the land and the water, the riparian zone, are extremely important for ecosystems for a number of reasons. They act as pollutant traps, preventing plastics, chemicals and so forth entering the waterways, and they help to clean the waterways. In Australia, mangroves, paperbarks, gum trees and casuarina trees are the most common forms of riparian barriers, and they also prevent erosion as well as natural pollution traps. The removal of destruction of these has very serious impacts on the surrounding land and water. It's like taking away a giant filter. So healthy ecosystems with riparian zones will help filter this for the fish, crabs, mud, and also the marine animals that live around there. So the most practical way to support a healthy aquatic ecosystem is to protect and encourage natural growth of riparian species, such as these mangroves, salt marshes and so forth. Regular cleanups can also be done by boat, by kayak or at high tide, where it minimises the amount of damage done to plants, and you can also collect a lot of marine debris that way. Adopting a local area and protecting your natural waterways. Monitor cleanup groups often do beaches, but doing river cleanups is also very empowering, and you can pull a lot of material out of there that helps prevent it from going out into the ocean. And recording these litter amounts is really important for future research and for future areas, keeping them clean. Just reporting any poisonous, illegal or destructive behaviours where people might be killing plant life and damaging the systems. So the next one we've got is camps, what I call camps and ramps. So these are basically pathways to the rivers and oceans. The mismanagement of this is mostly because most people enjoy being near the waterway. We all love, sitting by a river or sitting by a waterway, but the litter from people fishing, camping and using these recreational areas are often not deliberate. It might be things blow out of bags, things accidentally left, some is deliberate, some might be dumped illegally. And the impact of this is that because there's no riparian zone, this will get washed directly into the waterways, harming bird life, aquatic life, through ingestion and entanglement. The prevention of this is basically to take all the rubbish with you. Also adopt camping areas or areas nearby you. Often people will walk around and pick up any litter, ensuring that materials don't go into the waterways. And also make sure that all the loose plastic packaging in boats, cars and other vehicles are really well secured, and you've got good systems of keeping things contained. So then we go to the intertidal, the foreshore. So basically this is where it's starting to leave the land and it's gone into the waterways, and it's a lot of the tides and the winds are pushing a lot of this plastic back up onto the land, particularly by the into the high tide areas. But there might also be direct dumping of materials into the ocean, which will then wash back up. The impact of this is that only half of the plastic that goes into the ocean initially will wash back up onto the foreshore. Half of the plastics will sink and will stay under the water. After a few months, there's 90% of all the plastics will sink. And this is due to the fact that algae and different things start to grow on plastics, and it will cause it to sink under the water. So what we see on the beaches often is only a fraction of what's gone into the ocean. The prevention of this is to map your area. Mapping your area will reveal sort of the escape points of where it's actually coming from. It's sort of looking back at the 5 points previously to identify where it's coming from. This photo here is an island in a remote community in Borneo. The materials were coming directly from the village because there was no services or no infrastructure. A lot of the materials were dumped on the beach or in the water, and it was washing back up. So identifying that leakage point of this, usually this is a symptom of what's happening, is really good to sort of, address the problem. Beach cleanups are good, but as I said, it won't stop the problem as the majority comes from land. Okay, so we have, next one is the sublittoral zone for all the divers. This is probably the one we're most familiar with. So the mismanagement of this, not all materials will find their way back into the intertidal area. After a short period, most of it will sink, as I mentioned. The riparian vegetation traps plastics and pollutants from escaping. However, the sublittoral habitats, including seagrass beds, coral reefs, they actually capture material as well. So often you'll find in seagrass, you often find plastic and ropes and debris is entangled within the seaweed or the seagrass. Same as corals, when you've got very shallow corals, things can get entangled in them quite easily. The impact of this is discarded plastics can smother shallow water ecosystems and kill them. Sunlight can be blocked, which will kill things like corals and plant life, and seagrasses. Materials entangled in the shallow water will also be fatal for animals, including dugongs, turtles that survive on seagrass. I started the Plastic Collective after I saw a young turtle eat a lot of different types of plastic, and that was plastics trapped in the shallow water of a seagrass bed. So it was trying to eat the plastic. It was trying to eat the seagrass, but accidentally ingested the plastic with it and died from it. Coral being smothered by plastic can also lead to rapid bacterial transmission and almost like a cancer for the coral, so it's quite bad. And as well as ghost gear, entangling and damaging systems. So the prevention is, for anybody who loves the water, they'll understand the need for keeping plastic out of the water. So most divers, surfers, boat owners, paddlers, swimmers and others will naturally remove any plastic material they find in the shallow waters. The dedicated networks of divers and snorkelers, including Project Aware. In Australia, we have a group called Strawkling that go diving for straws. Kayak groups and other water lovers do regular cleanups of their favourite areas. So the action there is just when you're out and about, even if you're on a kayak or something, take a small bag with you, maybe a scissors or knife to be able to cut off any entangled material. Bring it back and get it out of the water. And also check out, learn to dive, check out go and join your local diving group and do regular cleanups with them. So the next one is the coastal open water. So this is where it's getting, further out to sea, less than 12 nautical miles from sea. This is the most popular area for boating activities, and the mismanagement of plastics, particularly on fishing boats, trawlers, could be cruise ships, yachts, and other vessels, can lead to an enormous amount of plastic pollution, as witnessed in the Gulf of Carpentaria when they've had the abandoned and lost fishing gear. We were recently up there when there was a large mangrove dieback area that occurred, and what happened was the mangroves released all the plastic that was contained in there, and it was all washed back out to sea. So in that we could see all the materials that were coming in, including plastic bottles, nets, and they're all swirling around in the giant currents of the Gulf. So when the plastics leave the shoreline, they travel deep into deeper water. They often get entangled in various habitats. And if they continue further out, the plastic materials will start to enter the bigger currents, the bigger ocean currents, and sweep along the coastlines, where they'll start to, interact with a lot of animals and different things. So often when you see plastic float up on beaches, or it's been in the sea for quite a while, you'll notice that a lot of animals have been chewing on it, eating it, like fish and different things like that. So the action is very much to report any floating lost gear. At the moment, they're going through tagging the ghost nets, because they're often quite big and they can't get them out of the water without dedicated shipping cranes. Tag it or locate the GPS location, understand the time, the direction of current, and report it. Other things that you can do is just ensure that, any boating activities that you're involved in, that nothing goes overboard. And make sure you bring back all fishing lines, traps, and other fishing gear if you're doing any fishing. So then once we start to get out past the 12 nautical miles open sea, the mismanagement is pretty much, it's already occurred. So it's on the currents now, it's moving out to the deeper ocean, and the materials are starting to get quite degraded and broken apart and so forth. So there's few vessels out there that are capable of retrieving these large amounts of marine debris, like I said, due to limited space and the distance back to land. The impact is that animals will start eating it, starts to break down, gets smaller and smaller, or the ghost nets, it tangles in giant balls and it just becomes like as they say, a ghost that kills a lot of marine animals. The entanglement and ingestion of marine megafauna, the large marine animals, has been recorded in all 7 marine turtle species, 30% of all marine bird species, and 50% of whale species, including dolphins. So as you can see, this is when it's starting to get hard to bring it back to land, and it's starting to really escape. Then we get to number 10, the deep sea guide. So in the middle of the ocean, we have these very large areas that have been recently discovered. So in 1997, Captain Charles Morse was sailing back from California when he recorded a disturbing sight. Far from land, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, he witnessed an enormous area of plastic, fragments and larger pieces, which he states spread as far as the eye could see. It seemed unbelievable, but I never found a clear spot. In the week it took to cross the subtropical high, no matter what time of day I looked, plastic debris was floating everywhere. So there was an essay from Moore in a Natural History magazine. The plastics that were caught in the giant spiraling currents that are wider than the state of New South Wales were called the Great Northern or the Great Northern Garbage Patch. Over the next few years, further research discovered that there was not just 1, but 6 swirling currents where plastic were trapped in an endless cycle. So on first hearing about this, it would appear to be an opportunity to be able to scoop up the plastics in the guys as they're all accumulating in one place. If only it was that easy. But the reality is these guys are absolutely massive, and the plastics are not floating on the surface, but submerged throughout the entire water column. The other problem is that they're not whole pieces of plastic, but fragments and microparticles of degraded and broken plastic which many have already been ingested by animals, which have died and then been released again. Projects like ocean cleanup have good designs and well-intentioned, but they are simply a drop in the ocean, guys. So when it gets to this point, the action is just don't let it get to this point. We've got to prevent it before it gets out there. Otherwise, the fugitive is lost forever. So what's next? What should we do? So what we've been doing is we've been developing plastic education and training programs. We've developed 8 modules in plastic education resource recovery operations, which part A is plastic education, and part B, enterprise essentials, part C, recovery and recycling operations. So just going over part A here, this is what we deliver to our programs. We've delivered 7 programs now. This is, if you can see up on 3.2, the hierarchy of management sits within the local community, where we go through living with plastics, and then we go through the hierarchy of capture, and then we go through 3.3, which is mapping your local area. So understanding those 10 capture points are really important, because then we can start to map your area and start to find those capture points to prevent all the plastics leaking or escaping into the oceans in your area. So I'll just go through briefly what the mapping of your local area looks like. So in the mapping of your local area, we set up maps to look closely at the key sites, such as townships, landfills, recycling areas. We also identify important and significant local areas, such as the list that I've got here, ecologically sensitive areas, so culturally and marine managed areas, marine protected, significant biological habitats, significant dive sites, tourism hotspots, biodiversity hotspots. So anything that's quite important, high usage, areas that culturally, environmentally significant. And then we go through and we identify the fugitive capture points. So going through this exercise, we have action plans for each of these, where we'll go through each section. So we'll look at the local area and we'll identify, is there problem bins, for example? Is there an area where you've got badly designed bins, and what are the actions? Who is responsible for it? What are they going to do, and what's the resolution for it? The second, as we said, the roadside litter, identifying areas that can be cleaned up. This area was in the mountains of Bali, beautiful area, but everybody would drive across the bridge, throw the material out the window. When I went back there, they've put signs up and they said no dumping here. So they've cleaned that area up and they've prevented it going into a deep ravine that would wash straight to sea. Seeing if the right gutters, drains, if there's any problems, are they regularly cleaned? Do they need to be replaced? Are they broken? Are they inadequate? Again, riparian zones, ensuring protective, healthy vegetation, set up kayaking groups, go kayaking, cleaning up areas. And then we go to the ramps and camps, like who is looking after them, who's responsible, do they need to put a bin there, and sort of a few posters, few education posters. The intertidal foreshore, this is where most of the cleanups occur. So most people do enjoy walking along the beach, and cleaning up on the beach is really quite visible and popular. And that's usually the first place that people start cleaning up. So that's a really good thing to do as a community, school groups, social groups. When we're getting into the shallow water, this is where the divers and the boat owners and the people who love the marine environment really come into their own, and they can do a lot of great work here. If you've got a boat, if you can, capture the shallow water material, fantastic, bring it back. We're also working on ghost net identification. So the coastal waters, being able to recycle nets, so retrieving nets from the fishermen, ensuring they don't go overboard, ensuring that they can pick materials up because they've got value. And then looking at sort of what's happening out at sea, and keeping the research, looking at the Five Guys Institute, the research that's going on, and seeing how the impact to the ocean is going. So that's pretty much summarizes my 10 points, my hierarchy of capture. So if anyone's we have, you can check out our website. You can also email us. We do have these education training programs available for the public if anybody's interested as well.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Louise, for sharing on the mismanagement of plastic waste and how we can do our part to prevent that. Right? I'm sure you've inspired all our viewers today, and especially me, to work towards the same goal. I really hope to meet up soon once the borders open up, and I look forward to meeting you in person at Singapore Ocean Week 8X show in June 2022.
Yes, I'd love to.
Yeah.
Definitely, I'll put it in the calendar.
So for our viewers, we're unable to have any Q&A session right now, but you can drop them on our Facebook page and we will try our best to get back to you as soon as possible. So stay tuned for the next session happening shortly, the 8X Virtual Expo. So thank you, Louise. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.